Okay, guys and girls. So this is our third and final lesson of the Spanish-American War. We're going to kind of look at one of the major battles from the Spanish-American War. But ultimately, what you really need to know for the Regents are the effects of the Spanish-American War, what happens after. We do get some good things, and we definitely have some Regents questions we need to go over since it's been a few days as well. So the focus question today is, what happens when America goes to war with Spain? Now, yesterday you found out the real truth on what happened to the USS Maine. We found out it was actually an accident. It was not really the fault of anyone. It was just one of those things that happened on board. If anyone, you had to blame the Americans on board because, they, just committed the accident, but it wasn't done by the Spanish. But this is 1898. There's a term, there's saying called perception is reality. So people believe that the Spanish were responsible. And then you also had yellow journalism and people kind of coming out there and saying like, hey, the Spanish were responsible. We need to make them pay for this. So even though the president at the time, William McKinley, we don't spend much time with him in class. He's a little interesting because he does get assassinated. But he's not a big person on your Regents, and we don't really have time to go over him. But if you want an interesting story of his assassination, you can look at it. He was president for about 2 or 3 years. Even though he personally wants to keep America out of war with Spain, he thinks it's a big mistake for us to go to war. Remember, the president works for the people, so the people were furious. You started to have these sayings going around, like rallying cries, and you would have the term, remember the Maine. Okay, people going around wearing these pins that you see on the top right, basically, demanding that America goes to war with Spain because of this. So it was a very popular thing. I would say, somewhere in comparison to the Black Lives Matter movement, it's something that, a lot of people would wear or show their support for. Even though not everyone necessarily agreed with going to war with, Spain, a lot of people got caught up into this hype. Okay, so, people were saying, remember the Maine. It was a very famous rallying cry. And when you combine that with the news articles that we saw about, Spain, which we're going to go into a little bit more in yellow journalism, this outraged so many American people that the U.S. government really had no choice, because the people were so incensed, but to declare war with Spain. And we officially declare war. It's only one of 5 declared wars in American history. The Civil War was the last one that we did in class. But we basically need to kind of go over, okay, what were some of the major details of the war. So we know the truth about the USS Maine, but back in history, that's what everyone believed the Spanish were responsible. All right, so we do declare war because of the yellow journalism, because of this, basic lie. It wasn't an intentional lie. Okay, no one survived the explosion of the USS Maine. No one could tell the tale. So this is what people believed. Okay, now the Spanish-American War is a war between the United States and Spain, but we are really technically allying with Cuba. And even though it's a war between Spain and the United States, there are no battles fought in America. There's no battles fought in Spain. The war is actually fought in Cuba, the Philippines, and Guam, and some of the other Pacific islands over there. Why are we fighting in those places? They're not random. Those are all colonies that Spain owns. We know that they already own Cuba, they already own the Philippines, and they also own Guam. Okay, so this is where we're going to fight most of the battles. There's 2 big battles from the Spanish-American War. We'll look at one. One's called the Battle of San Juan Hill, and the other's called the Battle of Manila Bay. Both are, kind of interesting. But what I want us to do is, I actually want us to watch this animated history video. A little corny, meant to be a little funny at times. But this is kind of a good overview of the Spanish-American War. We're not going to watch all 8 minutes, but this is a good review of the last 2 days. So we can go into the Battle of San Juan Hill a little bit. Okay? So let's get into this here.
Anything to report?
Nope, all's calm. Wait, there. Is that an explosive mine?
Oh, that? That's a banana rat.
Ah, that thing's the size of a Doberman.
Yeah, disgusting, isn't it?
Well, everything's fine then, yup.
Yup.
Yep.
Yup. Oh, did I mention I retire in 2 days?
Oh, really? That's...
Remember when Spain was the most dominant power in the Western Hemisphere? This was them in 1790. 100 years later, not so much. And revolutionaries in Cuba wanted to be added to the list of former colonies in 1895, but Spain was having none of it. Enter General Valeriano Weyler, the governor of Cuba, tasked with crushing the rebellion. He's perhaps best known for his reconcentration camps, but like any M. Night Shyamalan film, his came with a twist.
I see dead people.
He didn't detain rebels or undesirables. His camps detained the Cuban people. 1.5 million Cubans, 1/3 of the population, were at gunpoint forced to abandon their homes for these camps that, surprise, had inadequate food, inadequate supplies, inadequate housing, medical treatment, basically everything. And 400,000 Cubans died, earning Weyler the nickname The Butcher. Who gave him this name? These guys, American newspaper publishers like Joseph Pulitzer and his New York World and William Randolph Hearst and his New York Journal. And these guys hated each other just as much as they loved selling papers using yellow journalism, or sensationalism and crude exaggeration. And readers couldn't get enough of the patriotic Cubans fighting against the tyrannical and sometimes tawdry Spanish. But the papers and the public weren't enough to have the US intervene in the Cuban War for independence. You would need the businesses and politicians too. See, the late 1800s was all about imperialism, finding new markets and people to, trade with you. The US had dabbled in this, sending Commodore Matthew Perry to go open Japan and helping Sanford Dole to rearrange the power structure in Hawaii. But why go all the way over there when there's a perfectly good Civil War-ravaged island in your own backyard? Many in Congress felt that if the US was going to be a big boy country, it was going to have to start poking its nose in international affairs. So when the USS Maine was sent to protect the American interests in Cuba, namely sugar plantations, and mysteriously blew up on February 15th, 1898, the people were like, big business was like, Warhawks were like, Mark Twain was like, no. And Hertz and Pulitzer were like...
Okay, so that was a good little review of how we kind of got to this. You know, America is growing in imperialism. We're finding new trading markets, and you know, we already know that the Spanish leader, the General Weyler, was looked at as a very bad person. So you combine all those two things together, people were kind of itching to maybe, you know, get involved with this, with Spain, and maybe get involved with this war. I love what the video does here. It now goes into some of the newspaper articles that the yellow journalists would post at the time, and you can see how it kind of like, you know, gets Americans involved in this war. Okay, so let's take a look.
What's that small font say? It was in full effect. Crisis is at hand, Spanish treachery. Yeah, what's that small font say? Oh, so you don't really know it was Spain. Main explosion caused by bomb or torpedo. Oh my God, you know for sure? Question mark. You can print anything with a question mark. Destruction of the warship Maine was the work of the enemy. Then why are you issuing a reward for the evidence? Is it because you don't have any evidence? It's because you don't have any evidence, isn't it? In this headline, it's a quote by then Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Theodore Roosevelt. In case you didn't know, Theodore Roosevelt had already been a sickly child that manned his way to health, a Harvard-educated naval war historian, a cowboy rancher in the Badlands of North Dakota, the police commissioner of New York City, and at that point, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, where he super-duper pushed for building up the fleet and protecting interests in the Pacific and Caribbean.
Foreshadowing.
That was until war broke out and he said, "Peace, I'm going to war," resigned and started the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry Regiment, or the Rough Riders, because when you're Teddy Roosevelt, that's the kind of thing you do.
Okay, we're going to learn a lot more about Teddy Roosevelt over the next few days. This is the first time being introduced to him. This guy had a very long history of doing a lot of different things. He eventually becomes U.S. president, but before that, he gains his notoriety from basically fighting in the Spanish-American War. This was a tough individual. He was a leader in what's called a group called the Rough Riders. And this is kind of going to lead into our lesson a little bit more. Okay, so here's what you need to do, all right? Right now, you're going to pause the video, okay? You're not done with the video, you're going to pause the video. All right, take a look here. You're going to pause the video, and then you're going to do this reading on the San Juan Hill battle. This is one of the biggest battles of the Spanish-American War. Not too long. The first 3 paragraphs are all like kind of an overview. Then paragraph 4 is Teddy Roosevelt, kind of his recollections on the Battle of San Juan Hill, what he kind of saw, and then a reporter who was there at the same time. Okay, so you guys can take a look at that reading. You're to do that. Then you're going to answer the questions. Okay, 5 questions. Okay, I would say you should give yourself about 10, maybe 15 minutes to do this. Answer these questions. Okay, obviously you're not turning the assignment in yet because we have to finish up our notes for today. All right, so at this point you could pause the video. Once you're done, you're going to come back and we're going to continue the notes here. I'd rather you do this first before the end of the video. It just will flow a lot nicer. All right, so pause the video. All right, so at this point, the video, hopefully you're done with the Battle of San Juan Hill. Now you just need to finish up your final notes and do the final Regents questions, and then you guys are done for the day. So let's look at the results from the Spanish-American War. We're going to talk about why we don't spend too much time on the actual fighting of the Spanish-American War. But let's start with number 1 here. This is known as the Splendid Little War. Okay, splendid meaning, something just jolly and good. And Little War means it wasn't that big of a war. It wasn't big in the actual amount of fighting. It was an important war, but we'll talk about why it was important in a second. So why was it called the Little War? Well, or the Splendid Little War? Well, number 1, more American soldiers will die from getting sick and getting like tropical illnesses like yellow fever and mosquito bites than actual battles during it's only a 4-month war. It only takes place in the summer months of 1898. So basically, when you really break it down, it was like the Civil War had close to 800,000 Americans dying. And in this war, you have like less than 1,000, and more than half of them were just dying from like getting sick. Okay, they weren't used to the weather, basically. So when you really break that down in comparison, 1 person dying is too much. But like in comparison to the Civil War and other wars like the Revolutionary War, this was nothing. Okay, and we'll kind of talk about some reasons why. Number 1, America's Navy was so much stronger than the Navy was so much stronger than the than the Spanish. We had better weapons. We had even though Spain was one of the strongest militaries in the war, they got just honestly absolutely dominated. And with this win, this is number 2 is the one that starred because this is the one you'll see most likely on the Regents. With the Spanish-American War victory, it basically proves America is a world power and one of the strongest countries in the world. Okay, and I'll kind of break it down and explain. So Spain is one of the strongest militaries in the world. And there's a saying, of course, to be the best, you have to beat the best. And I wouldn't say Spain was the number 1 military in the world, but they were definitely up there. And America just destroyed them. I mean, just really, beat them without much of a problem. So if you're an athlete, if you play a sport, if there's a team in first place and you kick the crap out of them, all right, you're going to start, gaining recognition from people like, hey, those are the former champs. They're in first place, and now we just kick their butts. Like, it's going to start to turn heads a little bit, and that's what America does here. America is now known as a world power. At this point, we now have one of the strongest economies thanks to industrialization. We now have one of the strongest militaries, and this is proven by this Spanish-American War victory. And we have now one of the strongest countries in the world. Okay, why this is a huge time, this, late 1800s, early 1900s, is America goes from just being a country to being one of the strongest countries in the world. All right, and you're seeing that with imperialism, you're seeing that with industrialization, and we really haven't looked back since then. We've continued to be one of the strongest countries in the world since this war. All right, number 3, I've also seen come up sometimes. We're going to gain control of some territories that's going to become important to us. Number 1, if you're of Puerto Rican descent, we do gain Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico becomes a U.S. territory after this war, and it's been in our control ever since then. And, my prediction I've already mentioned to you, I think within the next 20 to 30 years, Puerto Rico will become a U.S. state, will become the 51st state, in my opinion. I think it's just a matter of time, but right now it's a territory. We also gained the country of the Philippines and Guam. Now, Guam is another territory that we still have, but the Philippines is really interesting because I've never seen it come up on the Regents, and many Americans don't consider it really a war, but America does go to war with the Philippines from like 1899 to 1902. We don't consider it a war, but basically for the Philippines, it's a huge war for them because they fight for their independence. Long story short, after the Spanish-American War, the Philippines think they're going to be independent, but they're not. We get control of them, and then eventually, over time, they're going to fight for their independence and win versus the United States. But American historians don't really consider it a war. If you've ever heard of Emilio Aguinaldo, he's very famous in Philippine American history or Philippine history. Ultimately, it's not considered a war, but we do send soldiers and fight in the Philippines to try and prevent the revolution. But I don't necessarily think we cared enough to keep the Philippines, and if the people wanted to become independent, we eventually let them. So that's a very oversimplified version of what happened in the Philippines. You could do some more research on that. But ultimately, that's not a war that's ever come up on the Regents, or is it really a war that's considered a true war in American history. Okay, so just if you want to take a look at that, that's perfectly fine. All right, and yeah, I want to do one or two other things. All right, so results of the war, we got to finish up that video. So some final results of the war you guys can write down. Let's just kind of finish up with Hawaii and then kind of talk about this Platt Amendment. Though the Platt Amendment's never come up on the Regents, I think it's definitely something we need to understand because it's going to lead to some more problems in the future of American history when we get to like Unit 6 and 7. All right, so Hawaii. So we don't get it from the Spanish, obviously. We know how we got it already. We went and took it over throughout imperialism when we wanted the sugar. But after the war, around the same time, we annex it and officially make it a territory, okay? Because originally it wasn't. I'm not sure if I even went over it with you guys in class. It's fine. But basically, Hawaii was independent from 1894 to 1898, and then we annexed it in 1898. That's something you really need to know. The Platt Amendment's kind of interesting, though, because basically we give Cuba its independence. Cuba's not allowed to make treaties that would compromise their independence. We basically are going to allow Cuba to be independent, but we basically like babysit them and like we can intervene in any issues that Cuba has because they're so close to the United States. So even though like we don't gain control of Cuba, we get very nosy with Cuba because it kind of, to be honest, it just led to us getting into a war. So we want to kind of prevent that from happening. And that kind of leads to some not so good relationships with Cuba that's going to come up a little bit later on in American history in like the 1950s and 60s and 70s. All right, but for now, we basically like Cuba has their independence, but we keep a very close eye on them. And there's a funny meme that I like kind of looking at here. If you're in history classes, it's kind of true. Like we spent a lot of time on the American Revolution, a lot of time on the Civil War and World War II. Maybe not so much time on some other wars like the Vietnam War, the Korean War, War of 1812. You guys are familiar with. We didn't spend that much time on that. But like the Spanish-American War, like never gets enough recognition for being a very important war. So if you can understand the meme, if you ever seen anything like this, it's like, like the mother's worried about this child, not about this child. And then of course the Spanish-American War is just dead at the bottom of the ocean because no one cares about it. But trust me, it was a very important war for American history and American morale. All right, so that being said, we're going to finish up the video, and then we are going to finish up with some Regents questions here. All right, so this is now you have a little bit of an understanding, a better understanding of the Battle of San Juan Hill, so you'll learn some different things about it coming up.
Anyway, war had been declared against Spain by Congress and signed by vampire-looking President William McKinley, only the third time in American history that war had been declared. And to this declaration of war, the Teller Amendment was added that said, no, we're not trying to make Cuba a colony. No. Well, maybe. So the fighting began on the other side of the planet. The modern U.S. warships, thanks Teddy, pulverized the outdated Spanish fleet at Manila Bay in the Philippines and gave America control of Spain's Pacific outpost. Back in the Western Hemisphere, over 18,000 troops and volunteers were deployed to Cuba under the leadership of General William Shafter. an elderly 300-pound-plus Civil War veteran that mainly sweated like a pig the whole war. The fighting was brief, but fierce, with the most famous at San Juan Hill, where Teddy Roosevelt and his band of Rough Riders fought tooth and nail, inch for inch, to finally take the hill and find it was already taken. Buffalo soldiers? Oh, hey, Teddy. What are you guys doing here? You serious? We've been here for a while now. Uh-huh. Well, this is awkward. Yeah. So many reporters have been waiting up here with us. Hope that's okay. Yeah, sure. Hey, would you mind taking a photo of me and my men? Little keepsake. No problem.
Yes, that's a kind of funny thing in American history. Teddy Roosevelt and his crew get credit for the Battle of San Juan Hill victory, but it was kind of already completed, and the Buffalo soldiers, who are American faction of soldiers, some African-American soldiers, had already taken the hill. So Teddy Roosevelt and his crew, the Rough Riders, get all the credit, but in reality, he was like actually a small part of the victory. But you know, when you get the photo and you get the media basically putting your photo up there as the creditor for the victory, he became a national hero, and kind of a little bit of a lie, which is kind of funny.
6 weeks after it started, the fighting was over. A splendid little war in which only 385 Americans died from combat and another 2,000 died from disease and other causes. It's probable that more soldiers died from rotten canned meat than fighting. Wonder if anybody's gonna do anything about that later. And now it was time to end the war with the Treaty of Paris. Seriously, another Treaty of Paris? You guys need to pick a new place to make peace. Whoa, 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 buddy. I got this. You don't need to bother coming in here. Are you sure? Yeah, just a bunch of legal stuff. Go enjoy your independence. You earned it. I don't know. I kind of think I should be there. Why? I already passed the Teller Amendment saying we're totally not going to make you a colony. Whoa, I gotta go. Spain's getting antsy. Hey, what do you call this? Jamon? I don't know. Tastes like ham to me. It's delicious. I can't stop eating it. All right, buddy. Here's the skinny. You're free. Spain's completely pulling out. And we're gonna pull in. I got this Platt Amendment that says that I have the right to intervene in you for the preservation of Cuban independence, yada, yada, yada. That cool? Oh yeah, and you can't allow foreign powers in Cuba for military purposes. Except for us. We get to lease a base in you forever, but you're totally independent. Oh, and do me a favor, tell the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico they're mine now too. Say what?
That's a good little review there. Now let's go to the Regents questions, and then you're done. All right, so news organizations were engaging in yellow journalism before the Spanish-American War when they what? Pause the video, take a look, and then unpause it when you know the answer. And the correct answer for this one's going to be 3. Editors exaggerated events to build support for the war. This was true. Basically saying the USS Maine was the work of an enemy when in reality they had no proof of that. Which 1890s headline is the best example of yellow journalism? Okay, so you're looking for an exaggeration. You're looking for it to be a little biased and sensationalized. So which one is the best one? All right, the best one for this one is 4. Spanish authorities butcher innocent Cubans. When you have a headline like that, it's like clickbait. Okay, it's like something that may get you interested in reading because it sounds very, very sad, where the rest of these 3 are just like basic headlines. Okay? Last 2. An important result of the Spanish-American War of 1898 was that the United States, what? Correct answer for this one is going to be 2. Became a world power with an overseas empire. I think that's a very straightforward question. We become a very strong country. Overseas empire means we have even more territories and countries all throughout the world that we're now in control of. That's what literally an empire means. And the last one, a major result of the Spanish-American War was that the United States did what? A little bit of a harder question. Hopefully you can get this from a process of elimination. We didn't give up territories for number 3. We didn't give foreign aid to Europe, and we didn't adopt a policy of isolationism. It was the opposite, right? So the best answer is 2. We assumed a more prominent role in world affairs. Most likely you'll see the first type of question is more of what you see on the Regents, though we have seen this one too, so I kind of threw it in there. All right, so that's it for today. Have a good rest of your day, and we will look at Teddy Roosevelt and his foreign policy a little bit further when he becomes president after the Spanish-American War. Have a great rest of your day.